Chapter 18. The Miracle of Stones. As the team discussed their approach to the Mangari, John made it clear that he did not advocate for the use of weapons. "We are not here to harm anyone," he said. "Our mission is to share the love of God and to bring peace, not violence. We must go in with open hearts and a willingness to listen and understand." Susan spoke up. "I agree. We can start by trying to establish communication and build trust." Amadi added, "I can help. My English get better. I can help tell words. I know some of their words." John looked at each team member and said, "Let's pray." The team then held hands and John led another prayer for guidance, strength, and protection for the team. They all closed their eyes and focused on the words of the prayer and the peaceful feeling it brought them. They felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, and with the guidance of God, they knew they could overcome any obstacle. "Faithful Father, you are our only hope in this world. You are the one who brings joy and removes darkness. You brighten any shadow. Dear Lord, we ask for your protection as we embark on this journey. We know that the road ahead may be treacherous and that the Mangari tribe is known for their hostility. We ask for your wisdom and guidance as we try to reach out to them in love and peace. Help us to be a shining light in the darkness, and to be a beacon of hope for those who may have lost their way. We ask for your strength to be upon us, and for your hand to guide us through any challenges that may come our way. We put our trust in you, Lord, knowing that with you by our side, we can accomplish anything. Amen." As they set up camp for the night, the team couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The jungle was alive with the sound of animals, a chorus of screams and growls. It was both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The team observed savage fights between animals, and it felt like a foreshadowing of what they might face with the hostile Mangari tribe. Dr. James watched in horror as a small bird tore apart an insect with its sharp beak. The crunching of the exoskeleton was like the sound of dry leaves being crushed underfoot. The bird's talons were like tiny knives, slicing through the soft flesh of the insect with precision. The insect's legs twitched in a futile attempt to escape, but the bird held firm, methodically devouring its prey. The red, glistening innards of the insect were exposed, like a gruesome display of viscera. It was a brutal and merciless act of nature, a stark reminder of the violence that existed in the world around them. As Dr. James watched, he couldn't help but think of the potential violence they might face from the Mangari. The scene was a cruel reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. The darkness was both comforting and oppressive, like a cloak of safety for fear and hidden daggers. They set up their tents, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched, as if the jungle itself was a silent observer, waiting for the right moment to strike. They knew they had to be vigilant, for the jungle was a paradoxical place, full of both threat and danger. As the night fell ever more deeply, the team settled into their small base camp. The fire crackled and cackled, casting an orange glow on the faces of the team members as they sat around it. They were deep in the jungle, surrounded by the unknown and the familiar. The chirping of crickets and the hooting of owls. Dr. James sat staring into the fire, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. He couldn't shake the image of the bird ripping apart an insect. John sat next to him, deep in thought. He knew that their mission was one of peace, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They were in the heart of the jungle, surrounded by danger. He closed his eyes and continuously prayed under his breath for the safety of his team. As the night went on, the team slowly began to fall asleep. They were tired from the long journey, but their minds were still active. They were all nervous of the nearby tribe and the unknown dangers that lay ahead. Some of them tossed and turned in their sleeping bags, their minds racing with thoughts of what tomorrow might bring. Despite their fears, the team eventually fell into a deep sleep, the sound of the jungle acting as a lullaby. They knew that the next day would be a difficult one, but they were determined to see their mission through. They would face whatever challenges lay ahead together. Susan began to dream. In Susan's dream, she found herself wandering through a dense jungle. The thick foliage seemed to be closing in on her, making it difficult for her to move forward. Suddenly, she came across a large, imposing gate. The gate was made of twisted branches and vines, and it seemed to be blocking her path. As she approached the gate, she noticed that there was a large, carved wooden figure standing guard. The figure was of a fierce, wild animal, and it seemed to be warning her not to proceed. But Susan was determined to find a way through. She reached out to touch the gate, and as she did, the wooden figure began to move. It turned its head towards her and spoke in a deep, guttural voice. "Find the key," it said. "Unlock the gate, unlock the tribe." Susan was confused. She looked around but saw no key. Suddenly, she felt something hanging around her neck. She reached up and found a small, intricately carved wooden key. She inserted the key into the gate, and it opened with a creak. As she stepped through the gate, she found herself in a peaceful, idyllic village. The people were friendly and welcoming, and they invited her to join them around a fire. They told her stories and shared their culture with her. As Susan awoke from her dream, she knew that once they had the key to reaching the hostile tribe, understanding and acceptance would follow. She would have to find a way to connect with them and earn their trust, just as she had in her dream. She would need to be patient, open-minded, and respectful if she hoped to bridge the gap between their cultures and find a way to peace. Susan soon fell asleep again and once again began to dream. In this second dream, Susan found herself in the middle of a bustling market. She was surrounded by vendors selling all manner of goods, from brightly colored fabrics to delicious-smelling spices. As she looked around, she noticed that many of the vendors were wearing the same type of skull paint as the Mangari tribe. Suddenly, she realized that the key to gaining their trust was to show them that she and her team were not there to take from them, but to share and trade with them. Susan woke up with a start, her heart racing. She knew that the dreams were trying to tell her something, but she wasn't quite sure what. She lay there for a moment, trying to piece together the symbolism of the dreams. As she drifted back to sleep, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She knew that whatever lay ahead, she and her team would find a way to reach the Mangari tribe. Meanwhile, John had also fallen headlong into a dream. In John's dream, he found himself standing in front of a group of Mangari tribesmen. They were all looking at him with suspicion and hostility, but he could see a glint of curiosity in their eyes as well. He realized that he had something that they wanted, something that could potentially change their attitude towards him and his team. John looked down and saw that he was holding a small box in his hands. It was intricately designed and adorned with symbols that he didn't recognize. He opened the box, and inside was a small, sparkling stone. It seemed to glow with an inner light and radiate a sense of power and energy. As he held the stone up, the Mangari's eyes grew wide with wonder and interest. They began to talk among themselves, their hostility and suspicion replaced by intrigue and curiosity. John knew that this was the key to reaching them, and he was filled with a sense of hope and determination. The next morning, the team gathered around the campfire to discuss their plans for approaching the Mangari tribe. Susan was the first to speak up. "I had a dream last night," she said. "I think it's a sign that we need to trade something with the Mangari in order to reach them." The team listened intently as Susan explained her dream and the meaning she believed it held. John then excitedly shared his own dream. "I had a dream too. I saw a stone in a carved box. I think it's something the Mangari would find valuable." "Doctor." James observed David's eyes growing wider and wider as John spoke. David stood up and declared, "I think I know where we can find something that the Mangari would find valuable. I can't say for sure, but I have a feeling it's worth a shot." The team looked at each other in confusion, but they trusted David and his instincts. John spoke up. "All right, David. We'll let you go and see if you can find this thing. But be careful, we don't know what the Mangari's reaction will be." David nodded and set out on his own, keeping the details to himself. The team watched him disappear into the jungle, unsure of what to expect. As the hours passed, the team moved their camp a bit further back, not wishing to alert the tribe of their presence while they waited for David's return. They couldn't shake off the feeling of unease, knowing that the Mangari were nearby. David set off at once to return to the temple. The journey was difficult and treacherous, as he had to navigate back through dense jungle and over steep hills. The heat was intense, and he was constantly on the lookout for snakes and other dangerous creatures. As he walked, he couldn't help but think about the hidden chamber he had discovered. He knew that the stone in the carved box was likely to be there, and his spirit whispered that it was the key to reaching the Mangari tribe. As he drew closer to the temple, he began to notice familiar landmarks such as an old twisted tree, and he could see the faint outline of the temple through the foliage. David pushed through the thick undergrowth, the vines tangling around his legs as he made his way to the entrance. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath before entering into the absorbing darkness. The temple was just as he remembered it, the air still stained and still. He made his way to the hidden chamber, where he would search for the carved box and its stone. Surely God had brought him here before for this purpose? And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to His purpose. David crept through the hidden treasure chamber, his eyes slowly adjusting to the minimal light that filtered in through the cracks in the walls. The musty smell of ancient stones filled his nostrils as he carefully picked his way through piles of dusty relics. He felt like a miner sifting through a mountain of ore, searching for that one precious nugget. The light from his torch danced off the surface of the gems and gold, casting a warm glow on the walls of the chamber. The jewels sparkled like fireflies, their facets catching the light and throwing it back in a rainbow of colors. The gold was like a river of molten lava, flowing and undulating in the flickering light. As he carefully sorted through the treasures, David couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He was surrounded by the spoils of a long-forgotten civilization, a glimpse into a world that existed only in the pages of history books. The treasures gleamed and glinted, each one a work of art in its own right. As he rummaged through stacks of gold and jewels, his eyes fell upon an intricately carved box. The symbols etched into the surface seemed to shift and change in the dim light, almost as if they were alive. He reached out tentatively, feeling the rippled surface of the carved wood under his fingertips. It was as if he was touching the skin of a snake, slick and cool to the touch. David held it up to the light, studying the symbols etched into the surface. They seemed to be a language of their own, a secret code waiting to be deciphered. With a sense of triumph, David placed the box carefully in his pack. David's hands trembled as he carefully lifted the lid of the intricately carved box. The symbols etched into the wood seemed to dance in the dim light of his flashlight, hinting at secrets and ancient wisdom. The wood was worn somewhat, as if it had been handled and cherished for centuries. As he looked inside, his breath caught in his throat. Nestled within the velvet lining of the box was a stone, gleaming and radiant. It was the size of a small apple and shaped like a teardrop, with a surface that was as smooth as glass. The stone seemed to glow from within, casting a warm, inviting light that beckoned David closer. The stone was a deep, rich purple, like a royal amethyst, but it seemed to shift and change color as David looked at it, as if it were a living thing. It seemed to pulse with energy, and David could sense the raw power that it held. He could imagine the Mangari tribe using this stone in ceremonies, worshipping it as a powerful talisman. David reached out and picked up the stone, feeling its weight in his hand. It was surprisingly warm to the touch, and as he held it, he felt a tingling sensation run through his fingers. He felt a sense of power and energy coursing through him. He closed his eyes and turned the stone over in his hand, studying its every contour and curve. The stone was a work of art. Each facet and surface had been polished to perfection, the edges were rounded and smooth. The stone seemed to have a depth to it, as if it was multifaceted like opal, each angle revealing a different depth of color and light. The symbols carved into the box seemed to match the symbols on the stone, as if they belonged together. David opened his eyes and looked at the stone again, feeling a sense of awe and wonder. It was a treasure unlike any he had ever seen, and he knew that the Mangari tribe would consider it to be of enormous value. He carefully placed the stone back in the box and closed the lid, feeling a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment wash over him. He couldn't wait to share his discovery with the rest of the team. He knew that this was the key to reaching the Mangari tribe, and he felt a sense of elation as he made his way back to the surface. David carefully made his way out of the lost temple, his heart pounding with excitement. As he emerged from the underground chamber, He looked up at the sky and saw that the sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted in a spectrum of colors, from deep oranges to fiery reds. The jungle was becoming quieter as the day came to an end, and the sounds of the animals and insects were changing. The calls of the birds and monkeys were becoming less frequent, replaced by the chirping of cicadas and the rustling of leaves in the wind. David made his way through the jungle, his mind filled with visions of the Mangari tribe worshipping the stone he had found. He imagined them using it in ceremonies, holding it up to the sky in reverence. He could almost hear the chanting and drumming in his head. As he walked, he kept a close eye on his surroundings, his senses on high alert. He knew that the jungle was full of dangers, and he didn't want to run into any trouble. The light was fading fast now, and David had to rely on the moon and stars to guide him. He moved slowly and deliberately, taking care to avoid stepping on any twigs or rustling any leaves. The darkness was thick and heavy around him, and he could feel his heart racing. He knew that he was close to the base camp now, and he quickened his pace. As he emerged from the jungle, he saw the faint light of the campfire. His heart lifted, and he let out a sigh of relief. He had made it back safely. He walked towards the camp, his eyes fixed on the carved box in his hand. The team would be overjoyed when they saw what he had found. He couldn't wait to share it with them. David walked into the small clearing where the team was based for the night. The fire was nothing more than a few embers, and the only person still awake was Dr. James.